You're reacting to everything, and it's draining you. Every message, every silence, every small detail. Your mind doesn't let anything go. And after a while, that creates a kind of tiredness that sleep doesn't fully fix. Because your body may be resting, but your mind is still engaged, still processing, still reacting, still trying to handle things that don't need that much energy. That's why you feel drained. Even on normal days, it's not always your schedule. It's the constant internal activity. It's the fact that your mind treats too many things like they require attention, interpretation, or control. And once that becomes your normal pattern, you stop noticing how much energy it is costing you. You just feel tired, tense, mentally crowded, and you assume that's just how life feels now. But it isn't. A big part of that exhaustion comes from one habit. Your mind keeps fighting with everything. This pattern is more common than most people realize. A lot of mental exhaustion has very little to do with major problems. It comes from constant micro-reactions. You read a message and immediately start interpreting the tone. You replay a conversation and think about what you should have said. You imagine how someone sees you. You anticipate a problem before it even exists. And your brain stays busy the entire time. Not because there is always a real emergency, but because your mind has learned to stay involved in almost everything. That is the pattern. Your mind doesn't know how to leave things alone. It keeps entering situations after the moment is already over. It keeps reopening things internally. It keeps creating extra rounds of mental activity around simple events. So the issue is not just that life happens. The issue is that your mind keeps extending what happens. It adds more thinking, more interpretation, more reaction, and more mental noise. And because this happens in small pieces throughout the day, it can be hard to notice. But the accumulation is real. Your mind is not dealing only with reality. It is also dealing with every extra layer it adds on top of reality. And that extra layer is often where the exhaustion actually comes from. Here is the shift that changes everything. Not everything deserves a mental reaction. That sounds obvious when you hear it, but most people do not live that way. Most people live as if every discomfort needs processing, every uncertainty needs solving, and every emotional trigger needs immediate internal engagement. That is what creates the problem. Your brain starts acting like involvement equals control. Like if you think about something enough, you are managing it. Like if you stay mentally attached to a situation, you are somehow protecting yourself from it. But that usually is not what is happening. Most of the time, you are not solving anything. You are just staying mentally active around it. And those are not the same thing. In fact, too much involvement usually reduces clarity. Because once your mind is emotionally entangled with everything, it loses its ability to see things cleanly. It starts exaggerating. It starts assuming. It starts building unnecessary urgency. So the real reframe is this. The goal is not to control everything better. The goal is to stop giving so many things access to your mind. That is a very different way to live. And it creates a very different kind of stability. Think about what usually happens. A situation occurs once in real life, but in your mind it happens again and again. You replay it from different angles. You imagine what it meant. You think about how it could affect the future. You create responses you may never need. So one event takes up much more space than the event itself. That is why people often feel mentally overloaded, even when their lives do not look overwhelming from the outside. The overload is not always in the calendar. It is in the internal repetition. And this repetition becomes a habit. Your mind starts expecting itself to react, to enter, to fix, to analyze, to prepare, even when nothing useful comes from doing that. That is why so many people say they want peace, but their mind has no habit of leaving things alone. It is trained for engagement. It is trained for tension. It is trained to treat small discomfort like a task. And once your mind works that way, calm starts to feel unfamiliar. But that is exactly why this pattern continues. Because if your brain believes constant engagement is necessary, then stepping back feels wrong at first. It can feel like you are ignoring something important. But often, you are not ignoring anything important. You are just refusing to create a second problem on top of the first one. And that matters more than most people think. That's what drains your energy. That's what keeps your system active. That's what makes your mind feel busy, even when nothing urgent is happening. So if you want more stability, you have to notice where your energy is leaking. And for many people, it is leaking into constant reaction. So what do you actually do with this? You do not try to become emotionless. You do not force yourself to stop thinking. And you do not try to win a fight against your own mind. That usually makes things worse. The better move is much simpler. Notice the moment your mind starts entering something. That moment matters. You get a text. You feel a change in someone's tone. Something goes slightly wrong. An old memory comes back. A future problem enters your mind. And right there, your brain wants to do what it always does. It wants to build a response. It wants to solve something immediately. It wants to interpret. It wants to defend. It wants to continue the story. That is the moment to pause, just enough to notice. Ask yourself, do I actually need to go into this right now? That question alone can interrupt a lot of unnecessary mental activity, because the truth is, many thoughts feel urgent only because your mind is used to reacting fast. But urgency is not always accuracy. A lot of thoughts lose force when you do not immediately join them. A lot of situations shrink when you stop expanding them internally. And this is where real mental stability starts to form. Not in big breakthroughs, in small interruptions of old patterns. You notice, you pause, you do not feed it as much. You let the thought exist without building a whole structure around it. And that changes your daily experience more than people expect. Because every time you stop extending a situation mentally, you save energy. Every time you refuse unnecessary involvement, you protect your attention. Every time you do not turn a passing discomfort into a long internal process, your mind becomes a little less reactive. That is how stability gets built. Not through intensity, through repetition. Here is the real point. You're not as exhausted by life as you think. You're exhausted by constant mental engagement, by reacting to too many things, by staying involved for too long, by turning small moments into ongoing mental activity. Once you see this clearly, things start to make sense. Why you feel tired after ordinary days. Why silence does not always feel peaceful. Why your brain feels full even when nothing major is happening. And the good news is that patterns can change, but they do not change by force. They change when you stop reinforcing them. When you stop treating every thought like a signal. When you stop treating every discomfort like a problem. When you stop assuming every inner reaction deserves your full attention. That is when the mind starts settling, not because life suddenly became easy, but because you stopped making every moment heavier than it needed to be. This is an important distinction. Mental stability is not about making life perfect. It's about reducing unnecessary internal friction. It's about removing the extra layer your mind keeps adding. And when that extra layer begins to disappear, your energy changes. You are still living the same life, but you are not fighting with every part of it anymore. That is a major difference. You do not need to respond to everything your mind reacts to. And you do not need to keep fighting with everything just because your brain is used to doing that. A calmer mind is not built by controlling more. It is built by engaging less, by choosing what really deserves your energy, and by letting small things stay small. That is where stability begins. Not in some perfect future version of you. Right here, in the moments where you stop adding more mental pressure than the moment already contains. So if this connected with you, pay attention to this pattern during your day. Notice how often your mind tries to enter, react, replay, and extend. That awareness alone is already a step forward. And in the next videos, we are going deeper into how real mental stability is built, piece by piece from the inside out. That's how stability is built, not by doing more, but by engaging less. Be prosperous from the inside out.